Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Pave the Way podcast. I'm your host, Greg Helbeck, and today I bring to you to everybody a powerhouse investor out of the Pennsylvania and Maryland market, Eric Brewer. So, Eric, thanks for coming on the show today.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Really excited to have you on today. So, if the listeners are not familiar with you, Eric, before you got into real estate, we're going to get into your business today. Just would you mind giving everyone a little bit about your background and kind of what you did before CR Property Group?
Yeah, for sure. Out of high school, I joined the military. I actually joined the U.S. Army and was in the Army for 3 years. Had a 6-year enlistment. I signed up to be a avionics communications repairman. So the short version of that means I've worked on radio communication devices in helicopters, predominantly the Chinook helicopter. If you've never seen that, it's like the flying bus. They crash like 40% of the time they go in the air. So they completely revamped the communication systems that I'd been trained on about 2.5 years in. And they gave me the option to either get an early out or go back to AIT. I opted to get out of the military. So I served 3 years of a 6-year enlistment, got out and ended up getting into the car business. There was obviously no civilian application to work on radios. I should have thought of that probably a little sooner when I chose what I was going to do in the military, but I got out and didn't know what I was going to do. So I applied for a job at a car dealership. I thought it was super cool. I'm only like 21 years old at this age, just turned 21. And it was a Mercedes dealership, a Toyota Mercedes dealership, and they needed someone to deliver cars for their service department. So it was a job that I got delivering $100,000 Mercedes. I was like, yeah. So did that, and I did it for a couple months. Ended up getting an invite to work in the service department. Ended up being a assistant service manager, which is the person when you go to the dealership, advises you on what service you're due for. If there's any, additional repairs or anything that the car needs while it's there at the dealership, they call you and facilitate that work being approved and all that good stuff. So I didn't know it at the time, but that was really giving me some sales experience. I didn't see it as a sales position, but it really was. Did that for about a year, and then the general sales manager of the dealership came to me and invited me to join the sales force. And I said no probably 15 times. No way, I can't be a salesperson. That's not for me. I was pretty comfortable. I was making good money for my age and was really good at what I was doing in the service department. And one time, it was like the 15th time he asked me, I was like, maybe. And there was a guy on the sales team that I was pretty close with. We went out that night, had a couple drinks, and he's like, come on, man, you'd be good at it. And I think I had like 3 beers, and on the third beer, I had some beer muscles, and I was like, all right, I'll do it. He's like, call Craig, the sales manager, right now and tell him so you don't change your mind. Told him I'd do it, and got into sales, loved it, worked my way up through the dealership. I ended up being the general sales manager. Back then, that dealership was selling about 600 cars a month, new and used. We were one of the largest Toyota dealerships in the region and the largest used car dealer for miles and miles. So we did a lot of cars, had over 30 salespeople, over 200 total employees. So I kind of worked my way into a big job. And at the end, I'd been doing that for about 8 years and kind of just got burned out. I was working 80, 85 hours a week. There was a big transition in the car business back then. This would have been about 2003. The development, obviously, of some of online buying services, access to information on the internet, and it got really hard to make profit selling cars. Most people came in, they had your dealer invoice, and they could shop 4 or 5 dealerships, with the click of a mouse. And it meant that in order to make the same amount of money on 600 cars, we needed to sell 750, 800. And I had just had my firstborn child. My son Camden was born right around this time period. And I was like, I know I can't do this. This just isn't, it's not going to be a long-term fit for me. I can't work 80 hours and be around for my son. So I actually just stopped working. I realized I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life if I was too busy working. So took about 30 days off and just did some soul searching and talked to a couple people in real estate, talked to a couple people in some different industries. And when I realized or, really kind of settled with what I thought I was good at, it was sales and customer service. So I looked for the transactions that would pay me the most to sell and realized that was real estate. So then I decided, how do I get into real estate? And one of the things that really made us successful as a car dealer back then was a lot of things, but our niche was really financing, which today in real estate. I mean, financing and funding your deals as an investor, whether you're a retail, real estate agent, knowing the different financing programs that are out there for different home buyers is a big deal. So I decided I would kind of get my feet wet and learn the mortgage side of the business. So I went and got licensed, did all my education that I needed, got set up with a local broker and was selling mortgages, which then was like 2004, 2005.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. It was like the Wild West, man. I was selling mortgages from my computer at my house, doing 25 loans a month, making, the same amount of money I was working 90 hours a week at the car business, and liked it. I was like, man, this is easy. Compared, I'm taking people from 7.5% interest to 4.5% interest. That was a pretty easy sale, right? Like, and selling somebody on a $900 payment on a Toyota pickup truck. So I was into it. I loved it. I, built some key relationships with people in the business and really felt like I made the right choice. Because, a lot of times when you make those career changes or you do something that's a little outside of your comfort zone, the first couple weeks, couple months, you're not quite sure if you did the right thing. It kind of settled in for me, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. And just the atmosphere of buying a home is generally exciting. People buy a car, they're like just miserable, right? Like they hate it. I actually hate buying a car. I'm fortunate that I have enough friends in the business that it's really easy for me when I buy a car. Kind of a car guy. I turn over cars like once every 6 to 12 months. So, but buying a car for me, if it's not someone I know, it's painful. It's just really hard.
Very adversarial a lot of the time.
Yeah. So funny thing is, the guy, my mentor in business and in life, who owned the dealership when I left, retired and sold the dealership. So now I'm into real estate, selling mortgages, and he calls me and he's like, listen, I tried to play golf for 6 months and be retired. I can't do it. He was 35 years old, 36 years old, and sold a massive dealership. And called me. He said, I heard a radio commercial about flipping houses, and I think me and you could make a bunch of money. I went over and met him at somewhere for lunch. We talked about it. He played me this radio commercial, and we looked at the website. Back then, it was possibly the only, if not one of brick and mortar real estate investing schools. It's called Investors United. It's just out of Baltimore City. And they ran a radio commercial, and they had a 12-month curriculum that I think it was like 10 grand or something up front. They would teach you how from start to finish, to lead gen, to how to write contracts, how to wholesale. And we signed up. So we signed up for the schooling. It was twice a week, 3-hour courses. In complete transparency, we went to 4 months worth of the class, and then they started getting into the negotiating. We looked at each other and like, I think we can skip the negotiating part of this schooling. And we had learned enough about, lead generation and contract engineering, which is what they called it back then. And came back, put together a marketing budget, and within like 3 weeks bought our first house and bought 70 our first year.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, they're one of the things Craig and I, who was my partner when we started this company, and is now my partner in our Maryland business. I have two offices, one in Pennsylvania, one in Maryland, and we killed it with marketing. I mean, you couldn't go 3 minutes without hearing us on the radio or seeing a billboard or having dealerships were taking quarter-page ads in the newspaper. We had 2 full pages. This is back when people still read the newspaper. That's how old I am, not to date myself, but 20 years ago, we owned the newspaper. And we actually were one of the few dealerships that did direct mail back then, which if you think car dealerships even today don't really do direct mail. And so, we had a knack for marketing and just sort of natural salespeople. And we were doing well. I mean, this was in 2005. It was kind of before the market really got crazy, but it was still hard to find homes. It was competitive enough that, most bank-owned properties had a couple different offers on it. But we bought 70 our first year. We predominantly, our first year was billboards. We did billboards and TV. So that's kind of how we got started.
Billboards and TV, and this is just to give everyone a geographical kind of context. You're in the southern Pennsylvania, like York, PA. Is that Harrisburg?
Yeah, York, PA, to give you landmarks. So, of course, Harrisburg's the capital of Pennsylvania. We're about 25 miles south of Pennsylvania and 25 minutes north of Baltimore and Maryland. So, geographically, we're basically halfway between the capital of Pennsylvania and obviously everybody knows where Baltimore, Maryland is.
Okay, awesome. So that's where you're coming from. So good area down there. I mean, we work with you on some of the sales stuff, so I sort of know that area. I'm from New York, so So
yeah.
That's awesome. So 70 houses your first year. So that's a lot for a new investor. So we'll go forward in a minute to where you're at today. But
keep in mind, so like to us, coming from 500 cars a month, like 70 was like, what are we doing? Like 70, like I would have fired somebody at one of our lots if they sold 70 cars in a month. So when you reflect back on it, it is a lot, right?
Yeah.
Especially for two dudes that had no clue what we were doing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But at the time we were like, okay, this is enough to kind of get started. But looking back on it now, 70 was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. Were you wholesaling those, or what were you fixing, flipping them, or because that's a lot?
We fixed and flipped everything. I didn't even know what wholesale was.
You fixed and flipped 70 houses. That is incredible. I mean, wow. So I'm sure did you do well on those houses, or was it kind of up and down?
We had on about 64 of them. I remember one particular house we bought. This was like 50 deals in. We were doing well, rolling. And I got a lead on a 4,000 square foot Dutch colonial. I still remember the address, 18 Elmwood Boulevard. Now, this was 13 years ago. I'll never forget this house. And I bought it. Seemed like a good deal. We thought ARV was like $399. Bought it for $120. Pegged the rehab at $100. So thought we had a gold mine, way bigger. But now keep in mind, prior to this, our average rehab was like $15,000.
Oh, wow. So they're small rehabs.
Yeah. And the average resale for us was like 80. So stepped a little bit outside of our comfort zone and paid dearly for it. The rehab ended up being $250. Took a year and a half, 2 years. Every contractor we had looked at it was like, I can't do this. So I hired a GC. And when it was all done, the house was amazing. But we went from like end of 2005 carried over into like mid 2007 and news plummeted. So I went over $100,000 on budget. My ARV went down by $150,000. We took a nice chin music there to the tune of about $150,000 loss.
Wow.
Learned a valuable lesson. We'll chalk that up to education.
That's right.
I just wish I could have expensed it over the last 10 years. It would have stung a little bit less. But so on most of them, we stayed in our niche. I mean, it wasn't really by design. It was kind of, that's what was available, right? Like we bought mostly city properties, $70,000, $80,000 homes. We were really good at selling. We weren't that great at acquisitions yet. Didn't really know much and didn't do a really good job renovating. But what we were great at was marketing and sales, right? So we were selling our about 95% of our own stuff. We were selling to retail customers. We were putting out ads. And you got to remember, in this market, bad credit, you could buy a house with an 80-20 loan back then. So we were advertising no money down, bad credit okay. I would sift through 30 phone calls a day and find 2 people we could get approved, and we were selling all our own homes. So didn't really negotiate on asking price. Back then, appraisals never got cut because values were just skyrocketing, and we didn't pay any commissions. So if I made $15,000 a deal, it's because I didn't give up seller's help, and I didn't pay $7,000 commission. All my profit was really just us selling the house on our own.
Wow. What a machine.
That was our business when we started. Bought what we thought was a good deal. Most of the inventory that was available was lower end stuff. But frankly, it was easier for us to find a large amount of potential buyers in that price point because they were mostly first-time home buyers, didn't have established relationships with real estate agents. And honestly, most people loved the fact that they could deal with the owner of the property. So we did really well selling, and we did that for multiple years, and then gradually got better at, knowing what an acquisition process should look like, and got way better. We hired a project manager in that time frame and got better at construction. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. I really appreciate you kind of giving me your background, because I never knew that I knew you were in the military, but the car business and buying 70 houses your first year, that's incredible. So let's fast forward today to where is CR Property Group at today? Because this is why I wanted to bring you on the show, because you do a lot of deals. So let's just kind of.
So we're tracking, we have an office, CR in York, Pennsylvania. We're in 7 counties in PA. We also have an office in Maryland. We operate in about 4 counties there. Collectively, between the 2 companies, we'll buy, acquire, wholesale, turnkey, fix and flip. We do a little bit of all of that. Collectively, between the 2, we should do about 450 homes. About 275 out of Pennsylvania and another 175 in Baltimore.
Wow. So that is some high volume. So you've honed your skills over the years. So I'm sure the listeners are thinking there's probably a couple things that are going through their head, how you doing this high volume. So the first question I have about that is to go from, 70 deals a year to 475 deals a year between 2 offices. If we had to boil it down to the 20% of the things that you did to get now 80% of your results, like what are the essential things that you did to successfully, just kind of high level, because just a little podcast interview, but.
So it's kind of a trick question, because what it took for me to go from 70 to 200 back in 2008 is much different than what it took us to sustain that 200 and grow to 300 to, pacing around the 300 mark in Pennsylvania. Really 2 completely different things. In 08, I just needed money. Like everybody else got out of the business, the market crashed. There was tons of there's entire shows and podcasts about how to prepare for the next correction, because people feel they'd be retired by now if they would have been better positioned in 2008. I lived it. I was a year and a half in the business, 2 years in the business when 08 came. Now, fortunately, if you remember, I told you we really stayed in that lane of the lower end stuff. And PA in our section of Maryland didn't, grow by leaps and bounds like some of the other markets across the country. So the correction had less of an impact on us because we weren't up as the highest highs. So our lows, a 10% correction on a $70,000 house is not going to put you out of business. So the inventory that we carried at these $70,000 and $90,000 homes really didn't change much in value. So there just became now more of that stuff available after, the crash of the market. And I was fortunate enough that my business partner at the time was extremely liquid. And we leveraged, his assets and then built relationships with bank, and we're operating with a line of credit of $15 million. And then it was just a ponderosa of income producing properties. Every bank owned, me think about it now, like people in our business don't even pursue on market stuff. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
By the way, we buy about 10 a month in each of our markets. So about 20 homes a month on the market. So don't believe that myth. You can buy stuff on market. It's more process generated. I've learned that you don't hire a salesperson for that. You hire a very calculated analytical person, which is hard for guys like you and us to hire, right? We interview an analytical person like, this guy's dry and boring, but that's what it takes to buy on market because the numbers are so tight. But nonetheless, in 2008, it was just having capital. There was nobody else buying homes. We went from having 10 guys doing business to 2. And so every public auction now, we were buying at 40%, percent of ARV, bank-owned HUDs. They were giving them to us, like, please take these. During that market, we built a short sale company, and we were buying 55, 60 short sales a year and negotiating and settling another 100. So back in 2008, it was money. We built a very robust on-market acquisitions process. And then as the market recovered, value stabilized, we've seen over the last, 4 years, 5 years, the competition in our, wholesaling, fix and flip, turnkey business has gone through the roof. So about 3 years ago, I had to make a choice. I went from making $20,000 a deal buying HUDs and bank owns to making 11. And honestly, I was a little burned out of the fix and flip business. It's the hardest thing in this business for me has been to scale the renovation side of the business. So I set out to look for, the best practices on lead gen, off-market acquisition, and wholesaling. So I got to throw a shout out to Collective Genius. Jason Medley was introduced to me. I went to the first meeting and came back with like, oh my God. Because that puts me back into really what I was good at, which was marketing and sales.
Yeah, the lead gen.
There's really no negotiating involved with Fannie Mae, right? Like I can give them the best anchors and the best, handling. They don't care. They're like, hey, listen, the computer says we can only sell it for 62. Let me know if you come up with something to overcome that objection, because that would be pretty clutch. But so now I was really excited. We went from having basically a $5,000 a month marketing budget to now between the two offices, our budget's just shy of $80,000 a month.
Wow. And just off-market stuff.
Just off-market stuff, yeah. And in both places, we have 2 full-time buyers that buy on-market deals. Each of them have an administrative assistant that really, scrubs all the different online websites, watches the MLS. As soon as a property goes on the market, our response is same business day to have it analyzed and an offer in. And we're buying combined about 20 to 25 properties on market a month in those 2 markets.
That's impressive, because a lot of people are saying, like you said, what I normally do is I buy the properties off market and then I stick them right back on the market and I compete with the REOs. And that's kind of like my niche up in the New York area.
Yes.
That's my favorite strategy so far. And because it's tough for me to go buy at auctions or anything. So I had to commit to getting good at marketing, right? The generating the leads, direct response marketing, sales. So in terms of, you're doing many more houses than I am right now. So in terms of your off-market marketing, what is your favorite channel? Because I'll tell you, mine right now is direct mail. I've been very open to direct mail. I used to be terrible at it. I've committed to getting better at it now. And now I'm seeing on every campaign I'm dropping, substantial return, like 5 to 6 to 7 to 1 return on my ad spend.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Favorite.
Direct mail for me. It's scalable. It's not like I know.
It definitely is. So here's the thing. The problem with that is it's scalable. So, on whatever scale you operate on, like how hard is it for you to drop 10,000 mail pieces a month?
I'm doing right now like 7,500 cards a month. And
that's decent. It's a fair amount, right?
Yeah.
But it's easy, right? You buy the data, you mail the list, you outsource it to someone. So that's the problem with direct mail. It's easy. So when an investor gets in the business, it's the first thing they do is direct mail. So I love it because like it takes no time or really energy, right? Like on the front end, we do some analytics up front. So we're targeting the right sellers. And there's 1,000 different opinions about how to approach that. But most of them come back to, there's a pretty baseline core demographic of people that are willing to sell their house at a discount. So once you acquire the data, then it's just consistency of having the mail. You'll see guys on these different podcasts and shows that argue about the style of the postcard, the size, the font. I'm a guy that says it like you can write it with a Sharpie and have a phone number on there. And honestly, they're going to call. Then it's more about your sales processes, how quick you respond. Gary Vee will tell you in today's market that it's way more important to be first than it is to be perfect.
I agree with that more.
Right. So, yeah. So, we still, we circulate about 5 different postcards designs. I've seen a big change in response rate, but virtually no change in deal conversion.
Really?
Yeah, like the Google image postcard, right? Was like, it's so awesome. People, the response rate's through the roof. And I'm like, well, damn, I got to take 30 calls though to get a deal. On the other postcard I'm using, I'm taking 10 phone calls.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, but we don't spend a whole lot of time, tweaking our direct mail. It's just about the consistency, being there at the right time when that person makes a decision that they're ready to make a phone call. So direct mail, so it's a trick question, and I'll give you a two-part answer. Direct mail is my favorite because, we're sending out 130,000 postcards a month between the two markets. And it happens without, like, there's mail dropping right now that I'm not a part of. It just happens on its own. No process involved. Our mail house that we use, we send them the data 90 days in advance. It kind of works by itself, right? But our response rate and ROI is going down because it is, there's different mail providers out there now that are a full service company. They'll provide the data, they'll mail it for you, they'll field the phone call, they'll set a warm appointment. So I love direct mail. We'll continue to do it. We've done it for a long time. But the new shiny object for me is texting. So texting. The response rate that we get is incredible. Now, it's a little bit less, it's not quite as a committed lead because we're saying, hey, would you like to maybe talk to somebody about getting an offer? The answer is either yes or F you, buddy, pound sand, right?
Yeah, right.
So, but we consider that a lead. If it's not an F you, buddy, we count that as a lead.
Sure.
We have, I use 2 full-time VAs. They send out about 1,500 texts a day.
Wow.
So, and if you think about it, I don't know about you, but I might get 15 phone calls a day. I probably field 2. I get 350 emails a day. At some point I look at or respond to each of them, but, not with any sense of urgency unless it's, it's an emergency. And then I haven't looked at my mail in 10 years. I just don't.
Your actual mail?
No, my mail in my mailbox.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I don't even check it. It just, if it's that urgent, they'll call me. Yeah, I don't do mail. No, it's funny.
But if you get a text message, how quick do you respond?
Whenever I see it. Yeah.
Oh, hey, almost right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So texting is hot. It is, I love it. And it's very scalable. So I have 2 VAs, very qualified, by the way, super skilled. The biggest problem with outbound calling and inbound calling with VAs is you get a little bit of resistance, particularly in my market, it's a big manufacturing blue collar demographic. The instant they hear an accent, they shut down. It feels like a telemarketing call to them. But with texting, there's no address. There's no accent. There's no, right? And when we set up the texting software, we put something like 800 different conditional responses in there that have softening statements. They have trial closes. So it doesn't require a sales profile. It's almost like a multiple choice. So when someone says, yeah, I'd be interested in selling, how's your process work? They just have to drag the response over from a multiple choice and put the right one in there. So we're scheduling about 10 appointments a day off of our outbound texting, which is crazy. I mean, if you think about even the best response rates to direct mail, to get 10 appointments a day is a pretty lofty investment.
Wow.
So we kind of do direct mail now because I'm scared to not do it and because everybody else does it. If I had to choose between texting and we do some outbound calling, I would probably choose texting and outbound calling.
Really? It's interesting you said. I did not know you'd say texting. I mean, that's the thing that everyone's talking about now. I have a lot of investors, that are my friends. They're talking about it. What about are you doing the RVMs? I've never done the RVMs.
I can't get it to work for me compliance wise. It's a super gray area.
Yeah.
I ran it through our, I have an attorney that's built each of my businesses for the last, 15 years. And texting's point blank. It's as long as you do it manually, it's considered compliant. RVMs, there's case studies where, so back when they passed the Patriot Act and the law, but ringless voicemails didn't exist. So they didn't write it into the law, but there's been cases where people have pressed charges class action lawsuits and won, and people have paid out. It's like up to $15,000 per occurrence.
Oh
So 2,000 ringless voicemails, doesn't take long to, put yourself in a pretty deep hole and be staring down the barrel of, millions of dollars worth of fines. So I know some people it works. Each state's different. I couldn't get a level of comfort here in Pennsylvania and in Maryland that I wanted to do it. And to me, the texting really is the same thing. If anything, it's a little bit more personable. So we've been able to make the texting work. And the big caveat there is it needs to be manual. Like, you can't send out 1,500 text messages in a batch. You need to, literally, I have a guy that just goes like this all day and clicks. That's manual. His name's not manual. He does it manually. But that's what makes it compliant. So we've been able to get a level of comfort, have multiple opinion letters from legal counsel about the compliance of texting. And we're about 4 months into it, and that's where our best deals are coming from now.
It's funny you say that, because you're talking about the scale, like the mass texting stuff, right? Like, you're not texting like 5 people a day. You're texting thousands of people a day. It's funny that you just said that, because besides the direct mail, like for my marketing, I like to go after the hairy deals where I find like the vacant properties and then trace the owners. And that's tough to scale, because those are really hairy deals. There's always title issues. I did my best deal ever. It closed on Tuesday. It was a 6-figure profit. And I sent the guy a text, and he left me because he didn't answer his cell phone. I personally called him because it was such a hot lead.
Yeah.
I send him a text. He responds to me, "You're the only guy who's ever texted me about this house. I'd like to meet you there." And the deal ended up working out. But I'm like, oh my God, like this. He got postcards he had a stack of postcards. I sent him a text. I bought the house, and then like a little light bulb went off in my head. I was like, maybe I could do this at a little bit more of a high.
Man. And then here's the thing, like when you look at the cost per contact, cost per, there's 1,000 different ways to break it down. But by the time I buy the data, right, and mail the postcard, it costs me 60 cents a piece.
Yeah, when you combine it.
12 cents a piece to send a text. So now I can, with direct mail, everybody's into list stacking and, like scrubbing your list and measuring. With texting, like, so what? I'll text 20,000 people with a 1% conversion rate. It costs me freaking 12 cents a piece. So I don't have to be like, I'm not an analyzer, right? Like my answer is always just like, if I'm not doing enough deals, I'll just drop more mail. I'll just spend more in advertising, right?
Yeah.
So these guys talk about like list stacking and measuring your ROI down to the cost per click and that's not me. I have people that are good at that. And, they keep us in line and we measure and make adjustments. But the best thing for me, because of the minimal cost when it comes to this texting feature is I bought the entire data set for 5 of the counties that I'm in. So the entire data set from the tax database. So I own every freaking address for all of those 5 counties. It was a massive set of data. And we put it into a tool that we use that's Property List Manager for one reason. That has the ability to update you when a property goes vacant. The property goes vacant, it gets added to our text list. So, that database isn't really going to change. The only way that's going to change is because it's property specific, not owner specific. But at the time it goes vacant, we then run the tax record, skip trace the owner, and then text. But the only new stuff that are going to add to that database would be new construction, which that's probably not something I'd likely buy anyway. So, I have my York County alone has 300,000 people, not a huge market. But between York, Adams, Franklin, all these different counties, it's just shy of 1 million people.
Wow.
I own that whole data set now, and I can look through that, list stacking tool that it goes vacant, but I'm not going to see if they're on 5 different lists. And then I'm not that smart. I don't.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
I'd give me a phone call and I'll negotiate a tough deal before I'll, stack a list 17 times and try and figure out the difference of a 0.5 percentage point who I should mail or not.
Yeah. No,
but that's me. I know people that they're so laser dialed in on who they're mailing that they mail a quarter of the people we mail and get the same results. For me, it's just that hasn't been, what I'm good at. What I'm good at is converting and selling and buying at deep discounts. So I spend probably a little bit more money on marketing than I need to. But that's what I love about texting. That, my original point is that it's so inexpensive. So you can text 25,000 people that maybe they haven't owned it as long, or it's not vacant, or, they might only have a 40% equity versus 50, but who cares? Like, it cost me 12 cents to have a conversation.
Yeah, it's so cost effective. That's so true. And I like how you mentioned the lead stacking software, because that vacancy flag is gold, man. That's where
so the cool part so now I put the entire, again, a lot of times, it's been a great source for us because we don't put an equity filter on it. It's just vacant. We get a lot of pre-foreclosure and short sales out of that, where people move out of the property because it's become too much for them. And we absolutely kill it with short sales. I'll buy 75, 80 homes between the two markets as short sales, and nobody's competing for those leads. Most people that go after pre-foreclosures are looking for high equity pre-foreclosures. Nobody's really, everybody fights over those. Nobody cares about the guy that's $50,000 upside down. To me, that's a gold mine. That's why the texting's such a hot spot for me right now.
That's awesome. No, I'm glad you shared that. I'm sure a lot of listeners are getting some good ideas here. So let's kind of wrap. We're going to start to end the show here on one more thing, and then we'll, share some contact information. So obviously you've bought and sold a lot of properties. So let's just cover a little bit on the rental side now. I know with all the homes you've purchased, I mean, what does your rental portfolio look like today? Because I know you do hold a good amount of homes in your area where you buy, and it seems to me from what we've talked a little bit before this podcast. I mean, it seems like a lot of the cash flow numbers, you mentioned turnkey earlier in the show. It seems like a really hot rental area, especially Pennsylvania from what I can tell, it's a pretty landlord-friendly state, unlike New York.
Yeah.
And California, where I'm right now. So what does the rental portfolio look like today, just out of curiosity?
So I'm just north of 80 rentals that I personally own. It's predominantly single family. I have a few smaller multifamilies in there, 4 units, 5 units, stuff like that. Nothing too big. Most of that stuff I actually bought and owner financed back in 2008 when the market crashed. People with great credit, well, let's say good credit, couldn't get mortgages. Like people with 640 credit scores and 10% down were getting turned down. The market as far as mortgages like overreacted to what happened when the market crashed. And I did owner financing for about 2 years and was charging 4 points on the front, 12% rates, 30-year AMs, 10% down. We got up to just over 140 owner financed installment sales agreement contracts that were cash flowing $70,000 a month net profit. And slowly over time, folks either refinanced, defaulted, willingly was like, hey, I can't keep up anymore. Where you buy the house back. So about 50 of those units of mine started as installment sales agreements, and then I converted them to rentals, which over time now with rent increases, since 2008, that mortgage payment at 12% that I was getting before is about the same as what that property rents for now.
Wow.
Now it's a rental property, not an installment sales agreement. By the way, I got out of that business. Actually, was a licensed bank. They changed back in 2010. Installment sales agreements were being heavily scrutinized, as was the entire lending industry. And they required us to be a licensed bank. So I went through the process of becoming a licensed bank.
Bank of Eric?
But no, it was Hillside Financial. And so anyway, but then, we stopped doing those. It got to the point where even though it was, truly an installment sales agreement, a lot of those clients needed to be treated as tenants. They needed some help with maintenance. I would fix a roof for $4,000 and add it to the back end of their mortgage. And it was requiring me where I was at a point to service those loans. I would have had to add 3 or 4 more people. So I stopped it. And at that point, fixing and flipping was becoming very lucrative. So we, instead of kind of cannibalizing our own fix and flip inventory, we went back to just selling them on the conventional market. But that's how I started to build my rental portfolio, because it was not something that I intended to do. I would turn my nose up at rentals. Like, why would I keep that and make $400 a month? I can sell it now and make 30. Now I know better. But, back then, I thought renting properties was silly. Like I went to 30 grand.
Wow. Like me.
Yeah. What the heck? $400 a month. You can stuff
Pay your electric bill,
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. And, at that point, I didn't have the confidence in a property management company if I did any volume. And I knew at that point it's, managing my rentals is not something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But over time, I started looking, 10, 15 years down the road. And I'm like, I'm not sure I want to be the guy sitting at the front desk here flipping 400 homes a year. Some of these deals, the challenge is you got to, like you made that 6-figure deal, you got to go out and find another one. That's great that happened, but what have you done for me lately, right?
Yeah.
Video today. I know you're a big Facebook video guy. I've been trying to do a better job with that, but it's that feeling in sales where you go from hero to zero.
Yeah. You're only as good as your last deal.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, that's great. That deal's, is that the one you did with the deck where you had all the issues?
Oh man. Well, that went through the ringer.
You earned your money on that one.
I was in New York for a month dealing with that, man. I was like a developer.
That's crazy. So my point is that, now I'm thinking about, what 10, 15 years down the road looks like. And my rental, kind of model has been to the Burr method. Like I just did a big refi on a package I just bought 5 years ago, not even 5. I opened the line 5 years ago. I bought my last property on that line 3 years ago, and I just refied it and pulled out almost $500,000 in cash. Re-amortized the whole loan. My cash flow went up $200 a month, and I walked away with a $500,000 check. And I haven't even been to those properties in the 3 years. It's just they're self-sufficient. I renovated them when I bought them. They occasionally there's a little bit of maintenance and turnover, but other than that, that's it. And then the big growth for us in the last year in both of our offices is now turnkeys. We buy, renovate. It's a slightly different twist on the Burr method. We buy, renovate, rent, resell, right? So instead of refining and then repeat, we resell and then repeat. So we're selling off to investors all across the country. I did a video today. One of our in-house sales reps did her first deal to a gentleman from California.
Oh, look at that. Maybe my neighbor.
Yeah, he bought a 2-bedroom rancher. Think about these numbers compared to where you live. 2-bedroom rancher, about 700 square feet. Not big, but it's perfect for a rental. It's easy to heat. Utilities are never too much for a tenant. Turns on this thing will be like $30 when the person moves out, right? Roof, new windows, new furnace, central air, detached, fenced-in yard, $89,000, and it rents for $10.50 a month.
Damn, that's
insane. Tell me about it. So I wish I could get my hands on 300 of those, but that's kind of like that's our core product here. We sell a lot of in our area, which you see a lot in New York, not Manhattan and some of the bigger metropolitan areas, but in the suburbs of New York, duplexes and semi-detached, brick built in like the 30s.
Yep.
That's our model. Our core product here sells for around 95 to 105 and rents north of $1,000. So, when you talk about like the normal 1% rule, we're right in line with that. And our typical cap rate here is over 8.5%. And cash on cash return when we're selling our turnkeys are 12 to 14%, which is phenomenal when you're talking about a $95,000 house. Normally when you see those bigger returns, you're on $200,000 rental properties, which, it's a bigger property, bigger commitment, bigger loan, bigger down payment. So I think the cool part that's really intrigued investors about our market is the values have been pretty stable for the last 15 years with historically, good appreciation rates. And I would never dare say we're recession proof, but we just don't get hit that hard because we're not up that much. Our values don't skyrocket when the market's doing well. Our homes just sell a little bit quicker, but we don't see huge increases in value, just days on market drops. So that's our core product on rentals, the 1,500 square foot brick duplex that rents for $1,100 a month, and we're selling them for 100 to 105.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. You can your market seems cool because you can do all the strategies. You can rent, flip, wholesale, turnkey. You got and like you said earlier, it's like, you're not in the Midwest, but it's almost like it's a Midwest type market where it's not going to get hit extremely hard usually with a recession. But like you said, it's not like you're in Phoenix or Vegas where the values are going to jump and then they're just going to get crushed and then they're going to
It's like we're like the opposite. You know the old saying, it's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
They say that about California.
So what they say about here, I don't, by the way, I love my hometown. I was born and raised here, is it's a nice place to live, but I wouldn't want to visit there. When you get it, it's backwards. So doing business here is great because like the cost of living is so much less than, when you go to Maryland, these property values I'm talking about are nearly double.
Wow.
30-minute drive, Greg. Like, so for me, I live here. I live in a big old house. It costs half of what it would cost across the Maryland line. So we draw a ton of people that commute to work in Harrisburg at the state capitol and make six figures for a job that would pay $40,000 in my hometown. And we have just enough, like there's a huge Harley Davidson plant here. The average person there, without a college education, not a super skilled trade, makes $70,000 entry level a year. Which is above the median income for our area. It's closer to like 60,000 here. So there's some big industry. Hershey Foods is close by, but it's 40 minutes away. So people pay a lot of money to live in Hershey. I drive 25 minutes to get to Hershey. No big deal. So that's what's kind of cool about this particular real estate market in central PA is that we're close to Baltimore, right? It's a short drive. You can go to Baltimore. There's two major sports teams there. It's a real city, right? Like they have everything a real city has to offer. It's like a miniature version of New York.
Yeah.
And Harrisburg's the same. It's a state capital. It has all the benefits of being in the state capital. So, and then even at our Baltimore office, we don't do a ton in Baltimore City. Most of our investments are in the surrounding areas like Cockeysville, Lutherville, Timonium, Parkville, Pikesville. But we're close enough to Baltimore City that people, will commute 20 minutes to get to Baltimore City, where a lot of the big, large paying jobs are. It's not that big of a deal to drive outside. So those are the two markets that work really well for us.
That's awesome. Even Baltimore, you're not too far from DC really. DC is only like an hour south of Baltimore. So you're in that sweet, I'm sure my brother goes to college at Temple. Philly's probably not far from you either. You're in a great
Philly's
spot.
Crazy. Two good friends of mine that are both, powerhouse investors. You probably know Jim Zaspel. He's in the Philly area. Those values are, 2.5 times, 3 times what ours are. And then Brad Chandler does business
I know Brad.
Virginia, in a suburb of DC and DC. And he can't even, it's impossible for him to buy rentals there because the numbers just don't, it didn't work. It's, the average resale price down there is over $350,000. It's really hard to make the rents work. So, we're pretty fortunate to be in this area. But DC's an hour and 35-minute ride from here.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. I was down in DC a couple months ago, and I was like, especially if you go into like Arlington, Virginia.
That's where Brad lives, is in Arlington. Yeah.
It's a nice area. So, like you said, the houses are $400,000 or $500,000. So, Eric, listen, I'm really happy you came on the show. I think the listeners got a lot of value hearing your story from getting out of the military to now today buying almost 500 houses a year. It's incredible. So, you've provided a ton of value. If people were looking to connect with you, what would be the best way for them to learn more about Eric Brewer?
Best place to actually find me is on Facebook. You can obviously email me, but I'm pretty active on Facebook. I do a couple videos a day, just, updates and certain stuff that's going on in our business. Things pop into my head and I hop on Facebook and do a quick 3-minute video. So you can find me, Eric Brewer, on Facebook. You'll see in there that I'm in Pennsylvania, CR Property Group and Integrity First Home Buyers, CR of Maryland. You can email me at eric@crpropertygroup.com. I love networking. I love talking to different people in different markets. I've got some of the best ideas and tips on this business from guys that were doing 20 deals a year. So I love to talk to folks about the business regardless of the size of their business. So I would encourage anybody, if you have a call, I get lots of phone calls about you. I owe you a phone call about novations. You'd love those.
Oh yeah. We talked about that briefly. Yeah. That strategy. I'm like, oh my God, that's so smart. I never even thought about that. Cause
if you ever think about it, it's assigning a property to a retail buyer. That's a whole different show we'll have to do sometime.
Yeah. We can always schedule part 2 on novations. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, Eric, thanks so much for coming on the show. My listeners really enjoyed this. And we'll talk soon, man. Take care.
Sounds good, brother.
Awesome.
We'll see you.